I am so excited to announce that iDriveAClassic is now sponsored by Adrian Flux, one of the UK's leading classic car insurers. If you're looking for classic car insurance, I've popped a link to Adrian Flux in the description box below. Hi guys, it's Steph from iDriveAClassic, and today I'm back in a Toyota Starlet from 1979. Now, I have never seen one of these on the road. I have never seen one at a car show. I got offered the chance to test it, and I've driven all the way to the edge of England to drive this car. It's taken me hours to get here, and apparently I've landed in monsoon season. So in today's video, I'm going to show you around the outside of the car, bring you inside, show you all the delicious 70s vibes going on inside the car, and of course going to show you inside the boot, under the bonnet, and we're going to take it out for a test drive as well. And I'm hopefully going to give you a really good feel for what this amazing Toyota Starlet is really like. In last week's video, we looked at the Renault 18, and so it only made sense to go further afield this week, over to the land of the rising sun, Japan. And with that, we take out a car that you never see anymore, which is a 60 series, the second generation Toyota Starlet. Now, I don't know about you, but when I think about the Starlet, I think about the later 90s bubble shape, and I had no idea that Starlet had history steeped all the way back into the 1970s, because if you know me quite well, you know that Japanese cars aren't really my area of specialty, but I absolutely love discovering them because whenever you take out a Japanese car from this era, as you'll see today, you are always pleasantly surprised, which makes no surprise that they do so well today. Now, going back to the Starlet that we've got in front of us, the Starlet itself was initially launched in 1973, but the first generation was never initially available in Europe or the UK, which was a bit of a surprise because as the 70s kicked into life, the Japanese car market had really begun to take shape in the UK. And so we had things like the Datsun Cherry, which was not only being sold, but being really welcomed by buyers who'd previously been quite scared of foreign cars, being like, oh, no, 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 I'll stick to what I know, I'll buy British. But as we came into the 70s, it was that weird world of cars weren't living up to standards that they previously had, and so buyers started looking for different stuff, and with that the Japanese car market had really started to take a hold. And in fact, if you watch YouTube footage of some of the UK 70s motor shows, the presenters actually mention how foreign car makers are appearing at a show which 10 years prior would only have seen American and British manufacturers. So if you're into Japanese cars, this is actually a really exciting period because not only is there a lot of advancement in terms of technology, but you also see them start to enter markets that they weren't in previously. Which brings me on nicely to the fact that Toyota had noticed this change in the European buying market, so when they brought out the second generation of the Toyota Starlet in 1978, they thought, let's sell it further afield. So whilst the car that we're testing here today is indeed a second generation Starlet, this is actually the first generation which was made available to the British and European buying public. The 60 series, known as such due to the fact that the chassis code was KP60, was badged by Toyota as their entry-level car. It also entered a market in the UK whereby it was competing with other super minis of the decade. So whilst it was an entry-level car for Toyota, it very much had its own place in the car buying market. Now, this car was available in both 3 and 5-door body styles with a rear-wheel drive setup. So by the end of production, that was really the only Super Mini that was still kind of doing that, and it kind of felt a bit rugged, but they stuck with it. And so for home buyers in Japan, there was only one engine choice. You got the 1.3 litre. But if you were buying this overseas, like the original owner of this car, you could have picked from the 1 litre, the 1.1 and the more popular 1.3, which was an upgrade from the first generation where you'd only been able to get a 1 or a 1.2 litre engine. Now the suspension was slightly altered for this second generation, so the front remained the same and you had the McPherson strut and coil spring setup, and then to the back it slightly changed. So originally on the first generation you'd had your leaf springs at rear, and it changed over to a 4-link coil spring system. Now, in line with other Toyotas of the same era, disc brakes were standard, and in braking of tradition and a first for Toyota, the car had rack and pinion steering. Now, the trim levels on these were standard, deluxe or DX, which offered the same spec but was named DX in some buying markets, the GL, the XL, the S, the SI, the SE and the Lease. And it's worth noting that the SI went beyond the trim finish and offered a fuel-injected 4KE engine, and then you've got the Sprint. Now the Sprint gave you a wealth of extras, including a 5-speed box, a 1.3 engine, different interior, Toyota sports handling suspension, and the outside trim was, this is such a small detail but must have been really important, clipped rather than glued. Now this second generation had a facelift in 1980 and then in 1983. Now if you look up pictures online, it had a squarer finish, so it had like squarer headlights to the front, and it had real vibes of that Triumph Acclaim, and when I looked at pictures I thought that's exactly what it reminds me of. Now the second series, or the 60 series, was replaced in 1984 with the 70 series, again named after that chassis, and the 70 series was available to the UK market in 1985. Now that we've had a bit of a look around the outside, inside, under the bonnet, and of course in the back there, I thought I'd bring you inside the car and I'll show you the dash layout, because honestly this is so 70s and I absolutely love it. As we come inside the car, we have got, in my opinion, quite a lot going on, because this was designed as a car for people to be using as just an everyday car. This wasn't massive luxury. This for Toyota was just pretty bog standard and an everyday car. So let me show you what we've got. So as we come over here, we've got our glove box with 2 cup holders, very forward thinking. And inside there, we've got not masses of room, but just enough. And also the quality on that shut is really nice. And that is something, going slightly off tangent, that I do notice about this car. The finish on it and the quality of the plastic used is actually really, really good, because you get in some of these cars of this age and they just feel a little bit like they're about to break off in your hand, which can make for slightly stressful testing purposes. Now over here we've got an analog clock, and as we come across, this is something that I really like on this car, and I think you will as well, is this radio is inbuilt. I'm not sure what you do. I guess you'd have to take this whole section out if it broke, which is not great for in terms of replacing it, but for aesthetics and for the fact that you would buy it like this, I love it. It feels like the radio is something which has been embraced and put into the car. It's not just an afterthought which has been tacked in like some of these 70s cars where it's a bit of an option. Coming down under that, we've got this ashtray which is neatly hidden with a cheeky eclair wrapper in it, and then we've got our heater vents here, so they're quite powerful actually, but again it's that quality of the plastic is really, really good. And then coming up here into this centre bit, we've got our heater controls, so of course you can see there are quite a few different options there, and in fact the fan on this is really quite powerful. In fact, it started working soon as we got into the car, which for me is quite impressive, because one of the complaints that I would have of cars of this age is that sometimes the heaters are just a bit rubbish. Now looking in front of us as the driver, we've got quite a bit going on here too. So running from our left to right, of course, we have got our speedo, which is in both miles per hour and kilometres. So Toyota are really thinking ahead and thinking of both those markets. And then just under that, built into that, we have got our trip clock. Now, I do love a trip clock. It's something that I dearly miss on the Marina actually. Now into the centre we have got temperature gauge, a fuel gauge, and over to the right hand side we have got a rev counter with 2 warning lights built in there. So you've got your battery and you've got your oil there as well. Now you'll probably spot under the indicator lights we've got a selection of warning lights. So I'm going to show you some of these, because they all seem to work. To the right of that and just down, we've got a rear windscreen wiper, and we've also got a heated window. I also wanted to show you what I've got in front of me as the driver, because I've got the steering wheel with the horn, kind of as you'd expect it to sound, and you've got your two stalks. Now on the left hand stalk we've got our wipers. Now this for me is really, really good because you have got intermittent, and this is never put on 70s cars as standard, so it's so nice to see it here. We've got intermittent, double speed, and we've got windscreen washer jets as well, which I thought were a given until we took out that Vauxhall Victor the other week. On the right hand side we've got our lights as you'd expect, and then just in front of us there we've also got the hazard warning lights. Now this for me is brilliant because we have got a 5-speed box today, so as you can see, just check we're neutral there, and we come up into first, down into second, across, up into third, down into fourth, and then we come across and we go into fifth, and it is so easy to use. Now this is a little bit tricky getting into reverse, so you'll have to excuse me. I seem to work it out by going down, lifting and coming up into reverse there, but it felt a lot more natural driving it than demonstrating it for you there. Now let's get this car started up so you can hear what she sounds like. And we'll show you from the back as well. Now as we set off, I'm going to take you through the gearbox, and we're going to start off in first. We hit fifth gear around about 45 miles per hour, which is where I'd be expecting to hit it on something like this. Now I've been driving this car for a little while, that's a small confession for you at home, and for me this car is really, really ticking all the Super Mini boxes, because of course when this came to market in the UK, and it was massively popular at the time and was a good seller for Toyota overseas, the Super Mini market was exploding. It was the 70s when you had those small Fiats coming in, and of course it was when they started, BL finally started catching up and started getting that Metro ready for launch in 1980. So how does this fare in the world of Super Minis? Because Super Minis of course are the cars that I absolutely love to drive. They are easy to park, they look cheeky when you've parked them up, and of course they just have a special charm that larger cars really don't have. Well, first of all, something that you can always note of Super Minis of this era is that it is incredibly spacious inside. I've got a lot of room around my legs, and I've got a lot of room for passengers, and there's even room in the back for where I assume the children would be sitting. Now, as you probably clocked when we pulled out of that junction there, it pulls very, very well. And to go along with that, we do have disc brakes. And as you can see, any slight movement of the steering wheel gives us an almost instantaneous response. And in fact, the handling is very, very accurate. And I know that Metros and Minis get a lot of praise for how they handle, but in my opinion, this is handling far better. And of course, you're going to be asking me, well, Steph, if it's such a good car, why are there so few left? Well, just like the poor little Metro that became the victim of many Mini owners and banger racers and people that wanted a cheap runaround, these fared along similar lines. So unfortunately, these were the victim of many a banger racer, because as you can probably see from my driving experience, it's a really fun car to drive. And you know what? I bet if I took it onto a track, I'd have 10 times as much fun, because it is so nippy. It's really nippy, it's handling these corners well, and it's just all round a brilliant car. I mean, the things that I don't like about it are these two, I really, really hate, and it's something that I have lost the love for in recent times. It's a 3-door. I do prefer a 5-door, and these were available in a 5-door. And I guess apart from that, it's that I would have a little bit more chrome on it. I would have liked maybe a chrome bumper, but look, that's splitting hairs, because this is the first car in a very, very long time that I have driven and thought, I'm going to go home on eBay and have a look and set up a watch. It wasn't always given that you would have got disc brakes on a 70s car. And to say that this is the first Toyota that I've ever driven, I'm really, really impressed. And you hear a lot of people say that these overseas manufacturers like Nissan, Toyota, and they all came into the market in the 70s and presented cars which really challenged what we were getting as standard in the UK. And it's really taking this out today that's cemented that opinion for me, because I'm sat here in this Starlet and there is so much a standard that you just weren't getting in some of your British super minis or your Italian super minis that were just a bit of a given in this car. Things like your radio, your 5-speed box, the seats are comfortable, we have headrests. This may seem elementary now in 2020, but back in the day, these were real groundbreaking things. Now, I feel very biased doing this review because everything about this car for me has been special. I love the colour of it. It would match my living room, the orange and black. I love the dash of it, even though I'm typically not a plastic dash sort of girl. This is that 70s black where it's just, I don't know, it has a certain pastiche to it that I really enjoy. The handling on it is better than anything else that I've taken out from the 70s. And to say this was a budget everyday car, honestly, I am really, really blown away. And I don't really have anything negative to point out about it. Usually I try and find a negative for you guys, especially nowadays when I feel a bit more confident reviewing cars. But for me in this car, I'm really struggling to find it. I don't like the heater controls down here. It feels too fussy, feels like there's too much going on. This could have been simplified. It's relatively quiet inside. It's not the quietest thing from the 70s I've driven, not by a long shot. But is it bearable? Absolutely. You know, cars of this era, I'm not expecting it to be deathly quiet inside unless I'm taking out a Rolls Royce. Now, with so few left on the road, what are you going to do about parts? What are you going to do about support? Well, I actually picked this car up through somebody from the Toyota Enthusiast Club. So for me, not only do I like the fact that they've got an owners club that are out there supporting and encouraging the promotion of these cars, they are obviously a very active group as well, because they seem to be doing meetups, they are reaching out to YouTubers to offer cars and to offer support and knowledge. So for me, that gets a big thumbs up as well, because you've got that community spirit as well to support you in the journey with the car. Because realistically, the more 70s cars I take out and the more I experience, you're very, very rarely going to get a car which has decent parts availability and you don't struggle for a few bits. So yes, that's the review in a nutshell. It's been an absolute pleasure to drive this ar. I now desperately want one. I didn't expect to want one. I thought it looked nice from the outside, but I didn't expect the driving position, the driving experience to be so pleasurable. I've really, really enjoyed it, and I didn't expect to. And I'm also really surprised that it hasn't rotted away. I thought most 70s cars were plagued by terrible rot and just all looked a bit down at the heel if they hadn't had a bit of work done to them. But to say that this has never been restored and that it's exactly as it was when it left the factory, I'm impressed. I think it's a great car. I really hope you've enjoyed this video. Again, it's not something I've ever seen out before. More's the pity, because it's an incredible car. And if you've got one, leave me a comment in the comment section below. How are you getting on with it? Because I really want one, and I want to meet some more owners before I take the plunge. Right, until next time, take care and drive safely.